too. I love these diagrams that Alina and Andy produced. They're very pretty, if nothing else, aren't they? Are we allowed to say pretty? We were trying to figure out what we meant by influence. So we were actually working towards attunement. Andy, I'm happy for you to chime in.
Well, basically, you're predicting a given audio feature, such as the spectral flux, something like that, based on the spectral flux, or in fact, all of the other features that are measured, or the other partners, which is basically for example, okay, sorry, let me start again, it's complicated. So let's say you're looking at the spectral flux of the therapist, then you would see if that is predicted by any sense by the spectral flux or all of the other features such as roughness and pitch of the client at previous lags. And also the music as well is considered. And that's done for every single sort of permutation of the features.
We're working our way out about how best we can do this based on previous stuff that's taken place, which wasn't much, and using Andy's expertise and Alina's too to see what we could figure out, because no one's done anything like this. So yes, I don't think that this will be the end point of this type of research, but it's a beginning point to see what we could do. So it's over medium range, short and medium range, we saw the most effect, not so much in the long, but that was probably related to the fact we only had one time. So the influence that we saw was mostly from client to therapist, but also somewhat from therapist to client, and not quite as much influence from the music either. Although, it is the mutual relationship, which is the important bit in the therapy as well as the music. But music therapists are trained to use their voice in tune with the music. I was surprised there wasn't a bit more about that, but we'll look some more at that and at ways we can train.
Alison,
yeah.
Did you look at a condition without music?
No. Not in this one, but we've done some further things with a couple of psychoanalysis theses. So we looked at that some more. We're still deciding what we do. So in the bits before and after they're in the right stage, we're talking before some of that. So the final thoughts. We know that the way that we use voice has an influence on other people. Obviously, there's lots of people in that around that. But we're looking at how that might be an influence for therapists. And, we found you can actually measure things. We're still working out exactly how we get the meaning and perspective like that. But there's good stuff in there. It's the hardest part about this project I found was going from basic information into interpreting into applied situations and not to overextend what we claim from it, and at the same time being quite clear on things that make sense. In the end, it's the applied situation that matters.
Have you got any idea as to whether attunement has any influence on the effectiveness of the guided imagery?
No, because we weren't measuring the guided imagery itself. We were just.
So, can you just explain sort of what guidance you're attempting to impel in those sessions?
And yes, well, it's a misnomer for the method. It's really a very allowing method. It's not saying go and kill it around the corner. It's not that sort of guiding. It's very much either going from the person themselves. So as I said earlier, if they see a tree, the therapist might say, "What do you notice about the tree? Would you like to go closer?" And they say, "I'm not the tree, kill or my grandmother or whatever." It's like a waking tree, and then go all over the place. So it's a very informal. It wasn't my purpose to talk all about the method of GIM right now, or we've got to get through some of the other things. But yes, that's a very good point to think through how the guiding works. Because we didn't take a video, and we took a transcript as is usually the case in GIM, but it was just a recapture. and that was not the purpose of this. We were really just looking for the inputs. Other people have done a little bit of work about the work instruction. Someone else had a question.
Dr. Allison, so in the basic philosophy that underlies your studies, do you think that listening to music is an auditory activity with sense making involved, or is it a bodily activity, like embodied listening kind of?
Okay, so you're talking more at the philosophical level of how does music impact person and how do they perceive it? Is that what you're saying?
So when we make these measures,
Yes.
what is it that we consider as assumed? Do we assume that the ears and sense making is playing a role? Or do we think that it's anyway happening even if the person is in coma or dying or, you know, in whatever state they are?
No, this method is only practiced with very age to participate. So we're thinking of this as being a music psychotherapy, which is the most
So auditory,
yes,
auditory and
so
sense making as well.
yeah, yeah.
Oh. Thanks.
Okay, well, there's a lot more we could say about all of that. There must be some feedback. Is maybe this one? I don't know. Or maybe there's one other one.
It should be better now.
Should be better now. Can you still hear me okay? Yeah.
It was better.
Excellent. So a little bit about impacts. So as I said, there've been 2 psychonis projects, which Andy and I are still looking at to decide, you know, whether we'll write that up further. Multiple presentations. People have been very interested from the bodies that do this type of music work. We've got a manuscript that's under review, which is completing the reviews right now. Very soon. And I think, you know, the implications about the nature of what is therapist for is really quite a lot about that, and how do music change with therapist voice is really what we're most interested in. So let's move on to another one, and let me check my time. I've been moving along. So another project, number 2 of 4. So anxiety with fertility and pharmacological treatment. So this was a collaborative research project that came originally from the doctor herself, Dr. Tash, who also calls herself the fanny mechanic, which is pretty funny. And she approached me. She was interested in music and imagery and relaxation, and she was using some music in her clinic, in her office, but she wanted to know more, and she wanted to do it really well, not just any old thing that she felt on. I was able to get little bits of funding along the way, and here again you see Gina, my trusted research assistant, who's been wonderful. So why fertility treatment? Well, 1 in 6 Australian couples experience infertility. That's quite a high rate. Anxiety is generated lots of ways, as you might imagine, lots of invasive procedures within gynecological and fertility treatment. And so there may be anxiety already over the issue of reproduction and so forth, but also then the procedures themselves. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of waiting to see, but very common, and also in our region of Sydney, of course, there's a lot more younger families southwestern Sydney too, so it's very important for our area. So why use music? Well, again, there wasn't a great deal of research out there about it, but we know that music helps with stress and anxiety in various situations, but not really enough about how it could help in our circumstances here. So, and just that last bit of that slide, music therapy can support different levels of practice styles. It could be supportive, you just have to support someone through something, be re-educative. So it helps people with more skills to be able to use music. That's what we reconstructive, which is the next psychotherapy. So as we started to look at this project and what we could do for the women, obviously we could help Tash with what music she played in her office for her procedures, and then consider what could happen with day surgery, day hospital, which we did think about. But then can we help self-efficacy or empowerment of women by helping them learn more about stress management, how music can help. And then the third phase, which we haven't got to yet, is can we do actually music psychotherapy, which people define as. So in the first project, it took quite a while to get this project going and to get all the pieces together. So in the end, we used a device called Music Star, which has come particularly from Denmark, Lars Bonda and Lars Bertel, sort of few others. So in pre-op and waiting areas, and there were questions before and after using the STAI, State Trait Anxiety Inventory, and people were completing surveys. With that, they just should be using live, not through. Oh, no, sorry, they should have headphones, but they weren't noise cancelling. In the second phase, it was designed for people to attend 2 music therapy sessions where there were several different activities, including receptive music therapy, the listening, relaxation stuff, and active techniques. So listening, discussion of lyrics of song, playing instruments and so forth. So and they again used the pulled out the state trait anxiety inventory and also another. Many of which were the day surgery between the office and 16. Even the doctor was surprised at the high levels of anxiety that were demonstrated. So it was quite clear that the music helped people relax and do it in this context. And we asked a few extra questions as well, so they would recommend this for friends. A few comments. It was distracting, calm, and pleasant. Music is an important distraction and takes you places. It helps slow the brain and stop overthinking. And soundscapes are particularly good as they transport you to another place. Breathing. There was an anecdote of someone undergoing embryo transfer who needed to go to the toilet really badly, and they'd been listening to some music that was actually watery type of music. And so there was a comment from the specialist saying, perhaps you don't want to use watery sounding music if they've got a full bladder before embryo transfer. So that was something I wouldn't have thought about, but that's what you get from working with clinicians. So then the second phase of running 2 sessions for anyone who would like them. We started our first session in person and then COVID lockdown. And so the second session happened online, and after that we ran it a couple more times last year as well. So it's all been online, which was good because there was more access in lots of ways, but also more challenge because you can't really play a drum. So we improvised with all types of things. But some comments that came back, sessions give you tools of use for reducing your anxiety and stress. Even if you already know, it helps you bring them back to the forefront of your mind, you get to meet and talk with others. And some of them were actually using their husband to going to the library, finding music, that type of thing. So in terms of impact, we were invited to do a podcast. Tasha was regularly doing podcasts, very high quality podcasts. So we did that with her. There's been a whole lot of interest from other fertility specialists. There's interest from a place in Spain, believe it or not. We were able to include students in the project, so it helped with training. A video interview last year for the AMBER network, which is a new support network which has been developed. And we also developed a health infographic before, so that was something new, for the competition that the Health Services Research Association of Australia and New Zealand had last. So those are some of the impacts. but you know, many women are undergoing fertility, IVF, and of course other gynecological treatments. The anxiety and stress is often not being addressed, and music is a way of doing this. All of the women suggested that music was helpful, and I think we'll expand it more, of course. So, keep going with time. So, are you ready for another? It's a bit like a tram stop. What's coming next? Hello, question.
Measures there. Did you have any consideration of taking, besides just the STI and the stuff, like cortisol or heart rate? And also, would you be following up to see the success rates of the IVF procedures with any of the participants to see if like the reduced stress actually, I mean, you have small numbers, you can't see that. If you're going to do multi-site stuff in the future, is that kind of the future?
Okay, there are a lot of questions there. You might have to remind me all the way through. I'm still recovering from a brain injury, and sometimes I forget things just a little bit. First question.
Physiological measures.
The physiological measures. No, we didn't choose to do that. It's another thing that could be done another time, but we chose not to do that. We were working with, the self-report. Yep. And
The other thing, just about the success rates of the procedures, whether this stress
we
reduction.
couldn't follow up further, but a lot of people that were involved in those 2 sessions had tried repeatedly many times and given up. So there were a lot of people that were severely stressed. It wasn't just people that were just trying their first time around. People were really severely stressed in all of that. And just being reminded in a way, it sort of humanised things for people. I think just even to remind them that they could use music, it was something more they could do. And many of the people were trying to have the best health lifestyle and so forth. But it becomes an overwhelming focus for people to try and get this thing done and solve this problem. So just, a bit of distraction at times perhaps, or just reminding them of other things they enjoy. Like she used to play the guitar, she had played it for a long time. She was picking up the guitar. Another thing we'd like to do is also look at the partners, the other partners, and effect on them too, and the stress that they have in the health system. So there's plenty more we can do. This is just the start.
Sorry, do a very quick question. That Music Star app, it was attractive to look at. I'm just curious, what did it do and what?
Yeah, sure. So this was developed originally in a hospital in a mental health ward for before and after ECT, actually. It's originally developed at the PhD project, but it's been applied in lots of places. So the idea was it's simple to choose music because you ask the average person or even us, how are you going to choose what you want? How are you going to choose the music that fits how you feel right now? And a whole lot of stuff is about familiar music and music that suits, if you look at the ISO principle, which is well known in music therapy, how are you going to choose what fits how you're feeling right now? So it was designed to have groupings of music within those different colours that was somewhat similar. Sorry. So each one of those triangles could be clicked on for an assortment of music within that. And that had been developed by someone else, so I didn't have to think through what music to use. And it was quite, good for a broad range of ages and stages of interests. But it was deemed to be similar types of music. Now, it came out of Denmark, so there's almost that question there in Australia. But it seemed to be pretty good in just being able to provide groupings of music. And you think literally it was a small iPad, should have brought one along. You just press on that bit and you've got 5 or 6 pieces of music, sort of genre. And if you don't like that, you can press on another one. So that was quite good. Ended up buying it myself, so it's ended up being quite expensive in the end. So, but I still have them there and we could use them. Try to whip through. So creating and applying a continuum for music and health continuum. So the reason for this, and this is also being written up, in fact, Jenny and I were recording a group conference last night. Jenny Frenchie says hello. She's very close to delivering her second line now. So, hello from Jenny. Confusion frequently exists about the various uses of music for health and well-being. So a lot of people just use the word music and therapy and they say, oh, well, it must be music therapy. It's therapeutic application, trying to help someone, it must be music therapy. That's not quite accurate in the way we understand it. Music therapy, there are certainly many therapeutic uses of music, but it doesn't mean it's music therapy as in a qualified music therapist. There's also other terms that have emerged in recent decades. So the idea of music medicine is different to medical music therapy, different to music therapist. Music medicine could be anyone who's got they're using music for some sort of health or medical thing. And it seems it's more than just medicine. But if we call it music medicine, I know the nurses get very upset. And so they should. So music medicine was coined and it's a term we're stuck with now, but it really could be better, I think. And also there's an increased need for interdisciplinary collaboration between all manner of things. So there's all sorts of confusion around this. So one of our foremost writers in music therapy, Bryn Steger, says music health and wellbeing is not a unified field. There's lots of diverse professions. There's very interesting work by Canadian music therapist Pearson, who's saying it's very common to hear of health musicking activities, she's calling them, being described as music therapy in colloquial conversation in the media, even in peer-reviewed literature. But she says here, for the thousands of clinicians around the world who spent a lot of time and a lot of money on becoming qualified music therapists and know the depth of what we can do, hearing the term music therapy inaccurately used is actually quite a slap in the face. So we were trying to work on the fact that music therapists shouldn't be the only people using music, other people can, but then the other people need to understand what music therapy is to the extent that they know it's a separate thing. So some of the issues are the definitions are often very fluid, the roles are often ill-defined, the relationships are often not well delineated, and the discussions that you see just are very confusing. There's a lot of misinformation in the whole field of music and health. So we were looking particularly on the roles and relationships. We decided that was where we could get some purchase. You might have seen me talk about this model before. It's in a white paper that we developed, and some of you were involved in that too. So we decided, well, at first we called them train stops, but that didn't sound quite right. So we're now calling them nodes of practice. So we had 7 nodes of practice on this continuum. And we talked to a lot of colleagues across the university who were interested in this white paper and developing things. And then we also consulted with community organisations and representatives at the time. So the nodes of practice are environment. It could be just you're hearing music somewhere and it makes you feel better, so that's a health effect. It could be you go home after a bad day and you put on music for yourself, whether that's calming music or very active music, could be either, but you're using music for yourself. It could be you're looking after someone, a child or an elderly person or someone else, and you use music to help them perhaps while they're eating or while they're learning to tie their shoelace or something. It could be there's a community arts worker running a choir or band or a drumming group or something. There are instances where there's trained volunteers, for example, in aged care and palliative care, who use music with people. There's other trained health professionals, many other trained health professionals who might be using music, for example, in my fertility study, or it could be cancer studies where people are using with radiotherapy or other types of treatments. I know when I had an MRI of my foot, they put on the music. You know what they put on? They put on I Feel the Earth Move Under My Feet, which is the most hilarious thing. And then I said, so why did you choose that? Oh, it was just the next CD. So I thought it was hilarious, but you need to look more at what music is used. And then you've got a trained, and there's many people that do use music very well. And there's trained music therapists who, in Australia, that's a master's level training at either the University of Melbourne or Western Sydney University. Australia, and I head up at Western Sydney. So we wanted to ensure that this collaboratively developed continuum was useful. So Jenny and I had lots of chats because we were asked to write it up for journal publication, and we decided we needed more consultation. So we went through this, and I'll just go quickly through this. So we decided to do a series of key informative interviews. So for each of these spots on the continuum, we decided to invite 2 or 3 people from around the world within our various networks who were highly esteemed, who would give some sort of feedback on how the continuum worked for them and applied to their circumstance, or what they thought about that. And we went through the whole ethics thing at the University of Sheffield, and that also got represented here. So we did a survey, and if they chose to not do survey, they could do an individual interview. So we asked questions about whether the model made sense, what didn't make sense, how did you find it helpful, and what would you see to be changed. And this is just a little bit about our key informants. So there were many that were music therapists, but we only chose the music therapists that were broad-minded. There's some that are a little bit narrow. So we chose the broad-minded ones and people that might have worked across a whole lot of these. So that was what they indicated as their primary node of expertise, but then most of them had all of everyone had lots of other nodes and ranges too. So many people said that it was useful, that the model helped, that it helped other people realise what was going on, to locate where an individual might be. It helped explain those different levels of expertise and to help make some boundaries clear. And it provided labels and definitions to the general public too, as well as people said about managers. So I think part of what was a challenge for us in the labelling of each of those modes of practice, and we're still working on it, was the applied context and the role and how we actually named that well. Feedback from a lot of the participants suggested that there was more complexity. So we'd worked really hard to make it simple. And once we had it simple, people said they wanted it more complex. So then it was, what was that about? And then we realised that the third point here, we began to realise it's an issue about people's role and being validated in their role and their context within the organisation, including the boundaries, the systems, the working environments. And so it's really crucial to understand, and this comes from the organisational side of things, how people find, make and take up their role within an organisation and how complex that is for each one of us. So you think of yourself, say you're working in the hospital, I don't know whether you are, you want to use music with someone, but you also walk into a shopping centre and hear music and it has an effect on you. You also may be going to look after an elderly mother or father and various other types of may have children. So you may be acting on a number one of those different roles, and something that you might have learned from looking after your elderly parent might be of interest and benefit to what you're doing in your everyday work in the hospital, for instance. So we're not just one single person, and I think that's what they were bringing out. So we anticipate that we'll look some more and probably keep the original model, but possibly add some more on top of that. Because even Jenny and I, when we talked about our projects, and that's some of mine down the bottom and some of Jenny's up the top, we realised that we were working on all sorts of different levels. So when you've got a line, it's hard to work out those connections between a lot. So we need something else. But from all of that feedback given, which was really helpful, we've seen there is some use for it. It's probably useful for beginners into the field and for managers and so forth. But that initial continuum model probably needs a second linked model that can be applied per person to map what they're doing and how that fits with the team and so forth. Impact was the white paper, where there was a great deal of interest and even more interest now from the key informants who are involved. We've got this paper coming out and we just recorded a presentation last night actually in Greece, which sadly can't attend, but will be there in virtual cells. All right. There's not very much in the last bit. International music therapy educational practices. This is still ongoing.
Alison, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure. Ask
I'm wondering how useful is it to think of all of those different practices as actually living on a continuum, because they all seem quite distinct to me. So if you're talking of a continuum, it kind of suggests that you could do something that was halfway between this node and this, the adjacent node. So I'm kind of wondering, aren't they just 7 different ways of sort of practicing engagement with other people, and that the whole continuum thing is maybe a bit superfluous?
That's an interesting point. Probably worthwhile considering that some more. So yes, you can't be halfway between being in the environment and being a personal individual person or being a carer. I understand. I guess we were thinking in terms of the amount of expertise of individuals, so that would be another piece. I think. Yeah. And if you think of it in a linear form, then what you've assumed is right. Yeah, good point. Got to think about it some more. It might not be a continuum, it might be some other model. It might be that we need to call it something else too.
Maddie just said consider a Venn diagram.
A little bit of overlapping, but a Venn diagram of sorts.
We've considered band type diagrams, we've been considering a spider type diagram, which I've used in other research. But it's a matter of who is it for and how does it help? That's really important. So yes, probably not continuum in the sense of continuous, which is the word of continuum. So we may have to talk about something else. But good point. It's the linear stuff that's tripping us up, and yet it made sense to put it all on the line to organise it. So it may be another organising way. Venn diagram with 7 things is going to be challenging.
No, that would be a nightmare.
And then, as I found with doing a Venn diagram for something else, it only makes sense as a Venn diagram if you can define what's happening in the overlap too. That's complex too. So we'll see. So again, another work in progress. I seem to be doing early things of everything. Early pilot types of work. Seems to be the story of my life. This was a project about international music therapy teaching practices. We'd been collaborating on various other things, and we were getting a bit annoyed that we were seeing people that were supposedly educators who didn't seem to know what they were doing. Plus, we knew that music therapy educators were doing different things in different countries. It's not well regulated as a worldwide thing. There's a World Federation of Music Therapy, but there's not like this is the worldwide standard. There's only Australian country standards. A lot of it's come from America, but not all of it. In Argentina, I think there's 7 music therapy associations or something like this. So it can be quite variable, and even if people are working with one of which, the newer one, is very good. We designed a survey with mixed method questions for music therapy academic educators around the world, and we had a snowball recruitment strategy. So we had a response of 61 educators from 19 different countries. The majority of them have been teaching for a while, mostly female and mostly from the United States. So that is particularly surprising. And this is my colleague, Dr. Annie Heiderscheid from Minneapolis. So in addition, we were about to send it out when the pandemic hit. And so we added some pandemic questions. Yay, that was a good thing to do, wasn't it? We thought, oh, this pandemic is going to last a few weeks, a few months, right? Is that what we thought in the beginning? But glad that we added some questions in. And so I'm just going to talk about those questions about maybe adapted and so forth. So people did report that there were a lot of challenges. Nothing here is rocket science. Switching to online training. In music therapy, one of the issues, as you will have realised too, is over Zoom or something like that, the delay, the time lag with music, and how to use that in both teaching and in telehealth practice. And then as part of this, as Casey, we had case examples we put forward. So we're still working on that, and it's will be published soon. The World Federation of Music Therapy heard about our study and wants to know about our results. So as soon as we've got that all, when we've got it all done, we'll let them know. We've also got a book chapter accepted about interprofessional practices in collaborative practices and how to best teach that, and a journal article about to be submitted about the pandemic. And then there's various other things I've been doing too. So that's all fun. Lots to do. So what can we learn from conceptualising our learnings across these 4 projects? Well, there's many, many ways to do research, and many teams can be built in different ways with all sorts of different levels of work, from basic and applied to theoretical and policy level. The topic areas can take some time to emerge and grow, and even to find bits of funding to help them along. We need to make best use of the resources available, even when they're fairly small, pilot studies, and even student and in-kind resources can be very helpful. It's really important to consult and do what the industry and the community needs, not just what we think they need. And there's a couple examples of that along the way, including the type of music not being the sound of water for people who need to have a full platter. So consulting and doing what the industry and community, the people out there need, and developing a trusted reference group or group of people that I think it's really important to be creative in what we do and to try new things. There's many ways to solve a problem. So we might have first thought we'll do it this way, but then change it that way. So sometimes you have to do that. And you never know where you might end up. I never expected to be becoming an expert on the music side of fertility treatment. I never expected to have a really substantial publication actually about redback spider bite, which I do quite a while ago when I worked in the emergency department. So you never quite know where you're going to end up, what you're going to end up doing, but it's an interesting journey. So finally, thank you. If you'd like to contact me, you're welcome to. And just to let you know, a little bit hot off the press, is that I'm about to move into a new part role 3 days a week as academic advisor for the health and medicine industry engagement here. And that's a little bit about what it's about. So I will be music therapy 2 days and in this other role through 3 on the other days. So any further questions or comments? Thank you very much. It's not 12 o'clock yet. The research perhaps to what everyone's doing. Question.
Anna, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection has been coming and going. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks so much. That was really neat. And I'm sorry, I missed a few segments, but it's really kind of inspiring to see all these different ways of getting at things that are related and that sort of thing. I had a question, and again, I'm sorry, you might have touched on this before, about sort of, the cross-cultural angle here. And, Alan Lomax, who was one of the great American ethnomusicologists and folklorists, used to remark that even for him, who had traveled the world collecting folk songs and that sort of thing, he would go to a new community. He usually didn't really like their music. It took a while to kind of acquire the taste for the music, and so he sort of remarked on how cross-culturally music is really sort of group specific and culture specific, or it can be. And I wonder if you could sort of remark on this. I mean, and really quick, the other thing from our own research with Andy Milne and Smith on a group in Papua New Guinea that I worked with for a long time, I think that the tempo stuff that you've touched on would resonate for them, but for them there's there's a lot of different emotions that can be evoked from sort of the same melody. So it's not that the melody itself necessarily evokes happiness or sadness or fear or that sort of thing. Usually the words will carry that for people, they say. So I'm just wondering, with all of this research, where does the world music and different scales and come in? Is it just should practitioners in Ethiopia come up with their own model, and practitioners in indigenous groups in Venezuela come up with their own model? So everyone comes up with.
Yeah, sorry, you dropped out, but I think I get the picture of what you're asking about. Yes, my mic's still on properly. Yeah. So the cultural aspect of music, especially thinking music therapy, which is where I come mostly from, is very, very important. And I've done some other work in writing around cultural aspects. But in music therapy, we're looking at the individual person and what they need, developing a program around them and what they need, and then working through what we can do with them and how that might help. So it is fundamental that taste and preference and culture and familiarity are really important to music therapy. In terms of the music used for guided imagery in music, it's come out of the Western classical tradition, but there's been into using other things, other types of music around the world. The other projects. Was it the continuum you were most interested in? Because I think the continuum can apply to whatever music is appropriate for the person. But definitely culture is very important, and the way that we interpret the music, and everyone has their own response to music. And one of the things I've been saying for quite, well, decades is that music in the context of health and music therapy is not prescriptive like a drug. It's not like take 3 concertos and call me in the morning. It's actually, you need to look at the individual needs of the person. You can't just prescribe all of them. Generally, there are general things we know about relaxing music. We know about a predictable beat, comfortable melody, and different ways that we might describe the melody, not too complex, those sorts of things. So we know things about the nature of relaxing music, but if you're going to use a classical piece of music, even Helen Bonny herself, who began guided imagery, says music is so multi-layered. If you think of, an orchestral piece, it's got all these different layers, and the person who's listening might be responding to the lovely floating melody across the top, but they might be responding to the viola in the middle going middle, or they might be responding to the cello that's going as it goes along. So, even within these multi-layered nature of music, people could be responding to different. They could be responding to a little chirpy piccolo up there that reminds them of the bird that was outside grandmother's house or something like that. So there's many ways, and I don't think we know all about how music interacts with imagery, and I would love to do some more of that. So yes, I don't know whether that made it any clearer, but yes, there's a lot of complexity around everything here, isn't there? So I'll just try and pull out a piece and work with the piece, and pull out another piece and work with the piece. And like all of research, we're working on one building block, another building block, and hopefully it comes together in due course. Have to tell us a bit more about the picture.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you all. We might have time for one last question.
There's no one else. And thank you very much, Dr. Ellis. Was thinking, is there any way you can actually think of us, from your experience, think of a scale for the impact on the senses? Like, do you do just questionnaires, or is there some kind of scale that you have?
Oh, that sort of scale. I wasn't sure you meant musical scale.
Not a musical scale.
You're talking self-report scale.
Like a scale from 1 to 100 or something, where somebody says, oh, this much of pain, or this much, I know the pain scale, but this much of impact this music has had on me.
That would be very interesting. No, I hadn't thought of doing that. Is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah, for trust. So, yeah,
no,
thank you.
That would be very interesting. Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, there's something called the Weber's scale, where he says that it's a logarithmic scale.
Yeah.
So if somebody is pinched this much, it just is a little bit. But if it's a real hard pinch, then there's a lot of difference between the first. I mean, I could say that well, but
Yeah, I'd be interested to know more, and maybe other people know about other scales. But I don't know about these scales at the moment. I'm ready to do something like that. And just mentioning the word logarithmic, I've done quite a bit of work around noise and the impact of noise and anxiety. The paper that just came out in January about noise in restaurants and how that affects anxiety. But again, it's not what you're asking for, but you just triggered that I should probably mention that too.
Does it help? Does noise help? Does noise reduce anxiety or elevate?
Oh, it doesn't help. Where would noise help? Generally not. No, white noise might help, I guess. To do studies about white noise, but no, it doesn't particularly. It actually, that was the result of the psychologist who looked at the effects. She did some really amazing. That was with Peter Keller. So no, noise doesn't really help in restaurants. The moment you mention anyone's, oh, those restaurants are so noisy. And I know certainly going through it with my mother, but it's usually that the noise was just awful for her. We had all we could do was take away those places because they want to clean surfaces. So it's all wood and that reflect the sound. So I've done other projects. Anyway, enough about that. There's always more questions out there. Thank you very much for inviting me. And please feel free to contact me again in the future.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Let's thank Alison again for. Do we have any interviews or no?
Yeah, okay, so there's a music science meeting at 3 o'clock. It's in the big meeting room on level 6, which is U605, maybe.
There's a psycholinguistics interest group meeting today at 2 o'clock. Not sure where it is.
Next door.
Oh, 402? Yeah, 402, just next door.
Also, writing group this Thursday morning. I won't be there in Newport, Alison, but you're welcome to just join the room and write if you want to. And also walking group. I promise I'll be there this week. I haven't been able to because it was, yeah, first week wasn't there, second week in COVID lockdown as close contacts. But yes, I'll be there on Thursday, so I want to see the park.
And very quickly, speaking of noise, shortly there will be 15 minutes of drilling. So they're just taking a couple of bolts out of one of the levels, I think it's level 5, but they said it will be no more, around about 15 minutes. We'll start pretty soon, I think. So we've got a hypothesis to test there. Alison, you might already have discussed this among Baby Lab people, but we didn't make the deadline to get suitcase plus here. So we didn't get approval in time for her travel later this week. So that is not happening as expected, which is really disappointing, but it's a very slow process for national travel we spoke about before. That was actually my error there. I had forgotten we needed to get approval for from Australia. So it was always going to be tight and I didn't think that through. So I'm really sorry about that not coming through in time. There are PCR requirements, there are test requirements 72 hours ahead of getting on the plane. So all these things meant that we just didn't make the deadline, which was Sunday or Monday. The level 7 practical completion has come through. So that happened last week, and a surprise to us all was that the stuff on the rig at in building 9 at Milpera got picked up and is now being re-rigged here up on level 7 as we speak. So thank you to people who have already been up there. Our consultant David Gilfillan has come through this morning and talked to me, talked to Amelia, which is great. But John, Andy, Roger, Chris Davis, you might be interested in just popping up to level 7. We've made some decisions about where the motion capture cameras go, but please, if you've got 5 or 10 minutes and just want to drop through as they're rigging things, that would be really appreciated. To maintain the acoustic in some of the rooms up there, there are incredibly heavy doors, like seriously heavy double doors that are automatic. When you do press the button for them to open, they are very slow, but please just be patient. They're open at the moment, but they are majorly heavy doors and there's an airlock, so there's a pair of them going in the studio. So pretty obvious thing to say, but just be careful and be patient because they are automated, but it's slow. Cable paths looks like we have a solution for those shielded rooms and a couple that are needed in Baby Lab. Once that gets approved by the university, it'll be 3 weeks for all that goes through. So we're progressing on that one. And that's really it. The main thing is it's just about staff drilling.
Do you know about the enterprise facilities in the basement?
Yeah, they should be through. I'll check on that. They were to be finished, so I'll get confirmation. It was very close. So, and I cycled from Parramatta Station through to right on this, Parramatta South yesterday. Very pleasant ride along the river there. Haven't done the full cycle through to here. I stayed in Parramatta, but yeah, the cycle path along the river there is safe and very nice. I really just want to wish you a happy break. Everyone's worked so incredibly hard. I think everyone's ready for a break. So enjoy Friday to Tuesday or any additional days you're taking. I'll have some catch-up meetings. We'll have a staff meeting and a student meeting, but we'll do that after Easter. Please enjoy your break and yeah, just do whatever stimulates and relaxes you, and we'll take it from there. But yes, if you want to pop through, particularly people doing work up in the performance space, it'd be great for you to pop through today. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
Alison.
We'll come. We'll see you next week.
Yeesh.